The person who never announces their goals is probably closer to achieving them than you are. My friend, you think sharing your plans makes them more real. That is a lie. It makes them feel finished before they start. Today, we are going to change that. You will practice real English, and you will learn the one strategy that quiet people use while everyone else is still talking about what they are going to do. Stay until the end. The final lesson is the one nobody says out loud. Welcome to English Story Studio. We build your English and your life at the same time, one honest story at a time. I learned this the hard way, when I had nothing left to announce and no one left to impress. My friend, I know where you are right now. You have goals, real ones. You think about them at night. You talk about them in the morning. And somehow, the months pass and the goals stay exactly where they were. You are not lazy. You are not broken. But something is working against you. And it is something you do every single day without knowing it. Here is the truth. Announcing a goal feels like starting it. It is not. It never was. It is one of the most comfortable traps a person can fall into. And almost nobody talks about it honestly. In the first part of this video, you will see yourself in the mirror. Clearly, maybe uncomfortably. In the second part, the old story gets challenged. Some of it will be difficult to hear. In the third part, something settles. Not excitement, clarity. The kind that stays. Stay until the end. What I saved for last is the hardest truth. And it is the one that actually changes something. Now, let us begin. Her name is Yemi. She is 27 years old, and she is good at her work. Every day she sits behind a screen and builds something. Not for herself. For other people. She writes captions that get thousands of likes. She edits short videos that hold attention for exactly the right number of seconds. She knows what time to post. She knows what color stops a scroll. She has studied this. She is not guessing. On her lunch break, she opens her own phone. She records herself. She announces a savings plan she's going to start this month. She posts a story about a design course she bought 3 months ago. She says, "This time is different." A few people reply. Someone writes, "Go girl." Someone writes, "I'm rooting for you." Yemi feels something warm for a moment. Then the bus reaches her stop. She goes home. She opens nothing. She starts nothing. The course sits unopened on her phone like a door she keeps pointing at instead of walking through. Every morning she wakes up feeling behind. I know this person. I was this person, not at 27. I had money at 27. I had confidence. I had a plan that looked solid from the outside, but at 45, after everything came apart, I was announcing things to no one in particular just to feel like something was still moving. The announcement was the only thing moving. Not me. If any part of Yemi's morning sounds like your morning, stay with me. Lesson 1. You announced it. That is why it did not happen. Here is the first truth, and it is an uncomfortable one. When you tell people about a goal before you begin, your brain does not know the difference. It starts to register the reward. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to reduce the pressure that would have pushed you to actually start. I did not learn this from a book. I learned it sitting in a small apartment, 45 years old, rebuilding from zero, wondering why I kept telling people about the business I was starting and never opening the laptop to build it. The announcement felt like action. It had the same shape as action. It gave me the same small lift in the chest. But nothing was happening. Nothing was being built. I was collecting the feeling of progress without paying for it. This is the mirror, my friend. Look at it. Not with judgment, with honesty. The feeling you get when someone replies to your story. That feeling is real. I am not saying it is fake. It is a real chemical response in your body. It is the same mechanism that fires when you do real work. Your brain does not always know the difference between a result and a reaction to an announcement. That is not a character flaw. That is how the brain is built. But once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The mirror only works one way. I have seen this pattern in people who are far smarter than me, people who were capable of building something real. They talked about it so well, so often, so convincingly, that eventually the talking became the thing. The actual work never arrived, not because they were weak, because the brain got what it needed before the work began. Nobody warned me about this, not once. Everyone encouraged me to talk about my goals, speak it into existence, tell the universe. And I did. And the universe gave me exactly what I asked for. The feeling of moving, not the movement itself. It is a Tuesday. Yemi is on the bus home. She has had a good day. She helped a client cross 100,000 followers. On her phone now, she records a quick story. 30 seconds. She says she is starting her design course this weekend. She says she is serious this time. 11 people reply before she reaches her stop. She screenshots the replies. She posts the screenshot. By the time she is home, she has spent 40 minutes on the announcement. The course is still on page 3 of her apps, untouched. She does not open it that night. She does not need to. The brain already collected something. I know exactly what that Tuesday costs. It cost her a Tuesday. Write down one goal you have already told people about but have not started. 1. Write it on paper. Put it somewhere private. Do not mention it again to anyone until you have real evidence of work, not a plan, not a post. Evidence. The announcement is over. The work starts now. Lesson 2. Attention is not the same as progress. These are two different things. Attention and progress. They can happen at the same time. But most of the time, for most people, they are moving in opposite directions. My friend, I know what it feels like to measure the wrong thing. At 45, starting over, I checked numbers obsessively. Not numbers that told me the work was growing. Numbers that told me people were watching. Views, replies, reactions. I told myself I was tracking progress. I was tracking attention. Those are not the same road. I learned this slowly, and it cost me months I cannot get back. The mirror in this phase is simple, but it cuts. What are you actually measuring? Not what you say you are measuring. What do you actually check first in the morning? What number makes you feel good about the day before the day has done anything? Yemi knows exactly how many people viewed her last story. She checks it before breakfast. She knows the number went up 3% from last week. She feels something, a small satisfaction, a sense that things are moving. She does not know how many lessons of her design course she has completed. She does not know because the number is 0. And 0 does not feel like anything she wants to look at in the morning. This is not a story about Yemi being lazy or lost. This is a story about measuring the wrong thing with real precision. You can be very disciplined about the wrong measurement. You can be extremely consistent about checking a number that tells you nothing about where you are going. That discipline is not nothing, but it is pointed at the wrong wall. Nobody told me that attention has its own momentum. Once you start measuring it, you start building for it. You make decisions based on what will generate the most of it. And slowly, without deciding to, you stop asking what moves the work forward. You start asking what moves the number that has nothing to do with the life you said you were building. I have seen this pattern eat years of good people's time. Real years. Not a month. Years. Someone I know spent 3 months building a small online store. Every week, she checked her social following more than she checked her sales. The following grew. The sales stayed flat. She kept making content about the products. She stopped improving the products. By month 4, the store closed. The account is still active. It has good numbers. She is not selling anything from it. She measured the right thing wrong and the wrong thing right. And the gap between those two eventually swallowed the whole project. I watched that happen from close. It reminded me of myself. It reminded me of what I was doing when I was 45 and counting the wrong things. Today, find one number that measures real output. Words written. Minutes of real practice. Pages read. Lessons completed. Compare it honestly. Just to yourself. No one else needs to see this, to the time you spend seeking attention for your plans today. Just look at both numbers. That is enough. Lesson 3. The audience you are playing to does not pay your rent. Say this out loud if you need to. The people watching your announcements are not invested in your outcome. They will not lose a single thing if you fail. They will not gain a single thing if you succeed. They are watching because watching costs nothing. And in the time it costs nothing, it costs you everything. I know this because I found out the hard way. At 45, when everything came apart, I looked around. The people who had watched me talk about my plans for years, they were fine. Their lives had not changed by 1 degree. Mine was in pieces. I had been performing for an audience that had no skin in the game, and I'd let that audience shape my decisions, my timeline, my sense of whether I was moving. My friend, the people who reply, "Go girl," are not bad people. I want to be clear about that. They mean something warm in that moment. But they will not be there in 6 months when the goal has stalled. They will not sit with you when the work is hard and the result is not coming. They will move to the next story. They always do. That is not cruelty. That is just the nature of an audience. An audience watches. It does not carry anything. This is where phase 1 starts to press harder. Because you might feel something right now. A small resistance. A voice that says, "But sharing helps me stay accountable." I've heard that voice. I used it for years. And what I know now is this. Accountability that depends on an audience is not accountability. It is performance. Real accountability comes from 1 or 2 people who know your actual situation and will ask you a real question when you stop showing up. The people liking your posts will not ask you that question. They do not know enough about your real situation to ask it, and you have not given them that information because you shared the announcement, not the actual work. Performance and progress are not moving in the same direction. They can look identical from the outside, but one of them builds something that exists when the screen goes dark. The other one only exists when the screen is on. I built in silence not because I chose it, because at 45, starting over, there was nobody left to announce things to. And that condition, that empty audience, turned out to be the cleanest working environment I had ever had. Nobody's expectations. Nobody's reactions, just what the work actually needed. Yemi posts a story every time she starts something new. The savings plan. The design course. The intention to wake up earlier. Each one gets responses. Each one gives her that small, warm lift, and each one ends the same way. 3 days of small effort, then nothing. The course sits unopened. The savings account has the same number as last month. One person in particular always responds. An old classmate, a few words of encouragement every time. That classmate does not know that Yemi has announced the design course 4 separate times. They just see today's story. They respond today. They will not remember tomorrow, and Yemi will not remember that they will not remember. She will feel the warmth and mistake it for something it is not. Name one person in your life, one real person, who will still be beside you in 5 years if nothing works out. Just one. If you have a real goal you are serious about, share it with that person, or share it with no one. But stop sharing it with an audience that has nothing to lose. The audience was never yours. The work always was. Stop. Before you continue, ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you started something without telling anyone first? Take a moment with that question, not to feel bad, just to see clearly. The answer is information. Use it. My friend, what you just heard in these 3 lessons is not theory. It is the thing I wish someone had said to me plainly, without softening it, because the softened version would not have been enough. Sometimes the truth needs to land without cushion. In the next part, we go deeper. The beliefs you have built around this, the ones that feel like they are protecting you, those are next. Stay with me. Lesson 4. Silence protects the work from other people's doubts. Here is something I believed for years. I believed that sharing an idea with people I trusted would make it stronger. I was wrong. What it did, almost every single time, was introduce a temperature drop I was not prepared for. Not because people were cruel, because an early idea cannot survive honest contact with someone who did not grow it. My friend, this is the fire. Phase 2. The comfortable part is finished. When you share a new idea with someone, you are asking them to evaluate in 30 seconds what took you weeks to imagine. They cannot help it. The brain moves fast. They see the risk before they see the possibility. They say things like, "That market is crowded," or "Are you sure you have time for that?" They mean no harm. But those words land on something young and unprotected, and young things bruise easily. I know this because I shared my rebuilding plan with 3 people I trusted when I was 45 and starting over. All 3 of them loved me. All 3 of them within 10 minutes gave me a reason it might not work. They were not wrong to say it, but I was not ready to hear it, and the fire in me went from high to low in a single conversation. I spent 2 weeks recovering that heat. 2 weeks I could have been working. This is not about closing yourself off from all feedback forever. That is not what I am saying. I am saying there is a window, early in the work, when the idea is not yet strong enough to survive doubt. You must protect it during that window. Not because the doubts are wrong, because the work has not yet built the evidence to answer them. The Sarah Blakely story is real and it matters here. She told almost nobody what she was building, not because she was secretive by nature, because she understood that a new idea protected from opinion has a better chance of surviving long enough to become something real. Silence in the early stage is not weakness. It is strategy. I learned this the hard way, which means I learned it late. You do not have to. Yemi had the design course idea for a long time before she bought it. When she finally bought it, she told a colleague at work. The colleague smiled and said, "That's a lot of competition in design right now." That was all. One sentence. Yemi did not open the course that week. She told herself she was busy. She was not especially busy. She was cold. Someone else's 30-second opinion had reached the fire inside a project she had not yet started, and the fire responded. I have seen this exact moment in my own life. The colleague did not mean harm, but harm does not always need intention to land. Think of one project you talked about that felt smaller after someone responded. You know the one. Now ask yourself one question. Did that person's opinion deserve the power it had over your direction? Make a decision about that. Today. Protect the fire before it is strong enough to survive the cold. Lesson 5. The urge to share progress is often the urge to stop working. This one is the one I needed someone to say to my face. Nobody said it, so I am saying it to you now. The moment you feel the strongest urge to post about what you are doing, to share the screenshot, to record the update, to tell someone how the session is going, that moment is almost always the moment the work has just become difficult. The urge to share is not celebration. It is escape dressed as celebration. I know this pattern. I lived it for months during the rebuild. I would sit with something hard, something that required real concentration and real discomfort, and within 20 minutes, I would feel an almost physical pull toward my phone. Not to rest, to share, to tell someone I was working. And the moment I did that, the session was over. Not because I ran out of time, because I had released the pressure that was the only thing keeping me in the seat. My friend, difficulty is the signal, not the signal to stop. The signal that you are in the right place. Hard work feels like something is wrong because your body wants relief. The phone offers relief. The post offers relief, but the relief ends the work. And the work is the only thing that will change anything. The fire of phase 2 burns here because this truth asks something of you. It asks you to stay in discomfort, not forever, just long enough for the work to produce something real. 10 minutes longer than you want to stay. That is all. 10 minutes is enough to change the session. I also want to say this clearly. The urge to share is not bad character. It is a response to a system that has spent years teaching you that sharing is productive. The notifications, the replies, the small dopamine that comes from being seen. Your brain has been trained. Dopamine drives motivation. It builds when you repeat an action, not when you plan it. The phone offers a shortcut to that feeling. But shortcuts do not build skills. They borrow from the future to pay the present. And at some point, the future stops lending. This is where we check on Yemi. 4 lessons in, she decides to try something. 1 week. No posts about plans. She opens the design course she has owned for 3 months. She completes the first lesson without telling anyone. No screenshot. No story. No day 1 caption. By day 3, the quiet starts pressing on her. She checks her old posts to see how many people have viewed them. The number is lower. She feels something she cannot name exactly. Not sadness. Something closer to invisibility. A colleague notices she has been quiet and asks if everything is okay. Yemi says yes. The colleague moves on. That night, Yemi almost records a video explaining what she is doing, why she is being quiet, what the experiment is. She writes the caption in her head on the bus home. Then she stops. She notices the urge. She does not act on it. I know that moment. I lived it. The urge to explain the silence is sometimes stronger than the urge that created the silence. It takes something real to stay quiet when staying quiet is the whole point. It cost Yemi something to put the phone down that night. That cost is the proof that she is doing something real. Now the lesson. The discomfort Yemi felt on day 3 was not failure. It was the feeling of doing something real for the first time in a long time. That distinction matters. We are trained to move away from discomfort, but in the work, discomfort is not the signal to leave. It is the signal that you have finally arrived. 2 days into a real working session, Yemi is in the second lesson of the design course. It asks her to complete an exercise she does not immediately understand. Her hand moves toward her phone. She is going to post. Working through something challenging today. 11 words. 30 seconds. And the tension dissolves. She puts the phone face down. She stays with the exercise for 12 more minutes. She solves it. Not perfectly. But she solves it. Nobody knows. Nobody replies. Nothing notifies. The course moves to lesson 3, that quiet movement forward. That is what real progress sounds like. It makes no noise at all. The next time you feel the urge to share something you are currently working on, sit with that urge. Do not act on it for 10 minutes. Set a timer if you need to. When the timer ends, return to the work. That is the whole instruction. 10 minutes. every time. Here is the uncomfortable question. What would you do tomorrow if you knew no one would ever see it? My friend, stop here. I need to say something directly. That question is not rhetorical. It tells you what you actually value, separate from what you perform. I asked myself that question at 45 with nothing to post and nobody watching. The answer scared me, because for the first time in years, I had to decide if I was building something for myself or for a reaction I might never get. Most people never find out the answer. They always have an audience. I had to find out the hard way. So do you. But you can find out now, while there is still time to choose. Lesson 6. People who perform discipline are usually avoiding it. I have to say this plainly. The person posting their 5 a.m. alarm screenshot is not necessarily more disciplined than the person who quietly trained and went back to sleep. Visibility and virtue are not the same. They never were. But the phone has made it very easy to confuse them. This is not about judging people who share their routines. I am not saying those people are fake. I am saying that the performance of discipline and the practice of it require different things from you. Practice costs. Performance pays immediately. And when something pays immediately, it is hard to keep doing the thing that costs. I built my early mornings at 45, not because I read about 5 a.m. starts. I used that hour because it was the only one nobody could interrupt. There was no performance in it. There was no post. There was just coffee and the work and silence. And that silence was not inspiring. It was uncomfortable and slow and frequently discouraging. But something was getting built. Because I was not releasing the pressure through a post, I was using the pressure to push the work forward. My friend Yemi knows the language of discipline better than almost anyone her age. She has written 100 captions about morning routines, habit stacking, and the power of consistency. She manages accounts that post about waking up at 5 a.m. and reading 30 pages and drinking water before coffee. She knows the vocabulary so well, she could teach it. She has not kept a single habit consistently for more than 2 weeks. This is not a failure of character. This is what happens when you spend more time around the performance of something than the practice of it. The language becomes fluent before the habit becomes real. The words fill the space where the action should be, and eventually, you stop noticing the difference. Real discipline is quiet, not because quiet people are humble, because real discipline does not need a witness to exist. It exists in the choice you make when the alarm goes off and nobody is watching. That choice, made repeatedly, becomes something. The post about the choice does not. Yemi manages an account that posts daily about morning routines. On Tuesday, she schedules a post at 7 p.m. the night before. The post says Day 14 of the 5 a.m. Club. The account's followers respond warmly. On Wednesday morning at 5 a.m., Yemi's alarm goes off. She turns it off and goes back to sleep. She does not own the 5 a.m. She schedules the post about it for someone else. This is not hypocrisy. This is the gap between performance and practice, made visible. I have lived in that gap. I know exactly what it costs when you finally decide to close it. Choose one habit you have described or posted about, but do not actually keep. Just one. Practice it today. No record. No post. No acknowledgement from anyone. Do it and let it be invisible. That invisible action is worth more than the post ever was. Lesson 7. The strongest version of you is being built in the moments nobody sees. We have come through the fire. Now the river. This is what I found when I finally moved. Not toward recognition, not toward an audience, just toward the work. The work felt different, slower, harder, more mine, and that feeling of ownership, of building something that existed independent of whether anyone was watching. That is the thing I had been missing for longer than I realized. My friend, Character is not built in front of an audience. Skill is not built there either. What is built in public, for an audience, tends to take the shape of strength without the core of it. It looks solid while the screen is on. When the screen goes dark, you find out what is actually there. Epictetus was a Stoic philosopher. He was born a slave in ancient Rome. He had no platform, no announcements, no audience while he was alive. His student Ariane wrote down his words. Those words have survived 2,000 years. Epictetus never posted. He never announced a goal. He lived and taught, and the work was real enough to last without his help. The river carries what is real. It drops what is performance. Eventually, always, I know this from the quiet side of 45. When there is nothing to post and no one waiting for an update, you find out very quickly what the work actually is. Not what you said it was, not what it looked like in a story. What it actually is at 6 a.m. with no one watching and no reply coming. Yemi's identity had been tied to how she appeared in her stories for years. When she started working without witnesses, she said the work felt different. Slower, harder, more hers. That is not coincidence. That is the difference between building something and performing the building of something. The first one leaves you with a structure. The second one leaves you with a record of pretending to build. The strongest version of you is being assembled in private, right now, in the sessions that have no audience, in the habits that have no screenshot, in the work that has no announcement. That version does not need you to post about it. It just needs you to show up for it. 6 weeks into working quietly, Yemi finishes the first module of the design course. She does not celebrate publicly. She opens the next module. A few nights later, she completes a logo for a small local food vendor. A quiet conversation led to it. Not a post, not a story, not a campaign. The project is small. The payment is small. But when she looks at the file finished and real, she feels something she has not felt from a reply in a long time. She feels like she made something, not announced something, made something. This is what I found on the other side of silence. Not fame, not a large result. Something smaller and more solid. The feeling that the work is real. Spend 30 minutes today on something you will not share, post, or mention to anyone for at least 2 weeks. Not because secrecy is the point, because the work deserves to exist before the audience arrives. Notice what that feels like. That feeling is information. Lesson 8. Results. Do not need an introduction. They arrive and speak. This is the last lesson, and it is the simplest one. But simple is not the same as easy. The person who has been working in silence does not need to announce what they have done. The result introduces itself. This is the only form of proof that cannot be argued with, not a story about what you plan to do, not a post about what you are trying to do. The thing itself, finished, real, present. My friend, I have seen both kinds of proof. I have seen people build real things in silence and watch those things find their own audience without a single announcement. And I have seen people announce beautifully, consistently, with real skill, and have nothing at the end of a year except a well-documented intention. The result does not need your caption. It does not need your explanation. It does not need you to contextualize it for an audience. It arrives and it speaks in a language that requires no translation. This is what the river phase means. The water does not announce where it is going. It moves. It carries what is real. It drops what is not. And it arrives. Not with noise. With presence. This is what changed everything for me. Not a strategy. Not a new habit system. The decision to stop performing progress and start producing it. That decision did not come with a post. It came quietly. in a small apartment at 45, with nothing to announce and nowhere to perform. And from that silence, something began to grow that I could not have grown any other way. You have that same condition available to you right now, not as a tragedy, as a choice. 6 weeks after Yemi's quiet experiment begins, the food vendor she made the logo for shows it to a friend. The friend sends Yemi a message, not through a post, not through a story, through a direct message from someone who saw real work and wanted more of it. The work found its audience, without a caption, without a strategy, without an announcement. Yemi did not post about the message. She replied to it. Then she opened the next module of the course. That is what this has always been about. Write down the result you want to have in 6 months, not the posts you want to make about it, not the reactions you want to receive. The result. Specific, real, private. Put that paper somewhere you will see it. Return to it in 6 months. Let the result be the announcement. It always was the only one that mattered. These 8 lessons are not separate ideas. They are one system. Announcing replaces starting. Attention replaces progress. Performance replaces practice. Doubt arrives early and kills young work. The urge to share is the urge to stop. Performing discipline avoids it. Private work builds real character. And results speak without captions. That is the river, my friend. Everything flows in one direction. From silence towards something real. You now have the map. The question is, will you use it? You have heard 8 lessons, but knowing something and applying it are 2 different things. I made that gap my home for a long time, so before you close this video, I need to tell you about the 3 mistakes I see most often and made myself when people try to apply what they just learned. Mistake 1. Replacing public announcements with private journaling about announcements. What? After learning to stop posting goals publicly, many people simply move the announcement inward. They write 5 pages about what they are going to do. They plan the plan in great detail. They feel productive. Nothing begins. Why? The brain does not care whether the audience is external or internal. If you are describing the goal instead of doing the work, the same mechanism fires, the relief arrives, the pressure drops, the work does not start. Private journaling about intentions is still an announcement. It is just quieter. Fix. Write 1 sentence only. The specific next action, not the vision, not the strategy, the next physical step. Then do that step before you write another word. The journal is for reflection after work, not rehearsal before it. Mistake 2. Using silence as an identity. What? I made this mistake more than once. After deciding to work quietly, I became attached to the silence itself. I stopped sharing even when sharing would have helped. I turned a strategy into a personality. I was not building. I was hiding and calling it discipline. Why? Silence is a tool, not a value. When you start defining yourself by what you do not do, you stop asking whether what you are doing is actually working. I used the silence to avoid finding out that the work itself needed improvement. The silence protected me from feedback I genuinely needed. Fix. After you have real work, not a plan, real completed work. Bring 1 trusted person in. 1 person who knows your situation and will tell you the truth. That conversation is not an announcement. It is a checkpoint. There is a difference. Mistake 3. Waiting until the conditions are silent enough to begin. What? I watched this cost me everything I had just started to build. After understanding the value of silence, people begin waiting for a quiet life before they start working. No distractions, no noise, no obligations. The right apartment, the right hour, the right season. Why? This is the original avoidance in a new costume. You have taken the lesson about silence and turned it into a new reason to wait. The work does not require a silent life. It requires silent intentions. Those are available right now. In any condition you are currently in, fix. Start in the noise. Start with the people around you. Start with the phone in the same room. Just face down. The silence that matters is not around you. It is inside the choice to begin without an audience. That choice is available today. In whatever room you are sitting in right now. 6 weeks have passed since Yemi made the decision to stop announcing and start working. She is not transformed. Her life does not look dramatic from the outside. She still takes the same bus. She still builds content for other people's accounts during the day, but she has completed the first full module of the design course. She has one paid project, a small logo for a local fruit vendor, found through a quiet conversation at a market. Not a public post. The payment was small. The work was real. The food vendor showed the logo to a friend. The friend sent Yemi a message. No campaign created that. The work created that. She is not where she wants to be. She knows that. But she is moving, and the movement is hers, not a performance of movement. That difference, she felt it. If you asked her now what changed, she would say this. I used to think nobody knowing meant nothing was happening. Now I think the opposite. That is all I wanted too. Just to be moving. Quietly. Forward. With something real to show for it. Of everything we talked about today, this is the one I want you to remember. Not the science. Not the strategy. This, the announcement, is not the start. It only feels like one. That single confusion has cost more people more time than almost anything else I have seen. Not laziness, not lack of talent, not bad circumstances, just that one quiet substitution, where the feeling of beginning replaced the beginning itself, and nobody noticed until months had passed. I did not notice for years. I was 45 when I finally understood it. Not from a book, not from a mentor, from sitting in a situation where there was no audience left to perform for. No one was watching. No one was waiting for an update, and in that emptiness, I had to ask myself for the first time what I was actually building, and whether I was actually building it. The answer was uncomfortable, but that discomfort was the most useful thing I had felt in a long time. My friend, I do not know your situation. I do not know what you have already tried or how many times you have started something and stopped. But I know the feeling of moving without evidence. I know what it is to collect reactions instead of results. And tell yourself there's no difference. I know how long a person can live in that gap before the cost becomes visible. The cost becomes visible. It always does. And when it does, you have two choices. You can explain the gap to an audience, or you can close it in silence. Only one of those choices changes anything. You do not need more information. You do not need a better plan. You do not need the right moment or the right conditions or the right amount of confidence. You need to begin without posting about it, without announcing it, without waiting for someone to witness the start. Begin today. Not this week. Today. In the quiet. Before you tell anyone. Before you write the caption. Before the story. Just begin. Results, not posts, define a person. And results are always built in the quiet. If today's lesson stayed with you, press subscribe. Not for me. For you. So the next lesson finds you.